Good morning. My name is Maria Ivanova. I'm an associate professor of global governance at the University of Massachusetts in Boston, where I also direct the Center for Governance and Sustainability. My sincere apologies for not being able to be with you in person today in Beirut and partake in the celebrations of the 10th anniversary of the Arab Forum on Environment and Development. Unfortunately, I had an accident and hurt myself, and I'm forbidden for traveling on a plane for the next 2 weeks. So it is an honor to be able to share this research with you through this video message, and I would be delighted to engage with any of you in a discussion after the conference, online or on the phone. Today, I would like to share with you the results of a research that we have undertaken here at the Center for Governance and Sustainability on the implementation of the global environmental conventions. States have created environmental conventions for a number of decades as a way to allow them to create collective action for environmental problems. The number of those conventions has increased. It is now over 1,200 such conventions, but most of them are regional or bilateral. Few, about 15, are truly global in character, meaning that they tackle an issue that is of global concern and of global proportions, such as biodiversity, chemicals, atmosphere, land, or world heritage, and that almost all countries of the United Nations are members in these conventions or universal membership. Today, I will share with you data about the implementation of 4 different conventions across these clusters, and we will look into the implementation across the world, but also zero in on how the countries in this region are actually performing. Why we started looking into these issues is because of this kind of problem statement that we have environmental issues that pose a threat to human security, and the global governance response is usually the creation of a global instrument, of an environmental convention. However, we do not know to what extent countries implement the convention, and then we cannot say whether that convention has really resolved the problem it was designed to resolve. Perhaps only in one state, with the ozone protocol, the Montreal Protocol on ozone depleting substances, can we say that the problem for which the convention was created has actually been resolved. So we set out to create an empirical measurement of implementation. We look at the environmental conventions and use the instrument that countries have, which is the national reports, to assess their implementation. Every convention has a certain type of national report that countries submit to the convention secretariats, where they respond to questions regarding the institutions they have created, the information measures, the management measures, the technical issues, and the financial issues. So we take the answers that countries provide to these questionnaires, and we code them or give them a score from 0 to 5, and are able to create an ultimate number for each indicator, for each question, and then for the implementation of the convention at large. So, for example, the Basel Convention on the movement of hazardous waste, question number 1 is, do you have a definition of hazardous waste? Yes, no, in progress. Yes is a score of 5. No is a score of 1, in progress is a score of 3. And this is how we are able to assess the conventions. So today we will look into 4 different conventions: the Basel Convention on the movement of hazardous waste, the Stockholm Convention on persistent organic pollutants, the Ramsar Convention on the protection of wetlands, and CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. Most countries of the UN are members in those conventions, so they're pretty universal in character. The national reporting rates for these conventions for the past 15 years, for which we have collected data from 2001 to 2015, vary across the conventions. That is the rate to which countries report to these conventions. As you can see, the Ramsar Convention has the highest rate of reporting. Countries report 86% of the time. Unfortunately, for CITES, countries report only 38% of the time which they are supposed to report. Think of this as an assignment that students submit, and then that assignment is graded. So if you do not submit the assignment, meaning the national report, it is very difficult to give an objective grade. So in the absence of a submitted assignment, the grade will be a failing one. But the index that we have created, the Environmental Convention Index, does not assess whether a report has been submitted, but actually the content of the report, so the content of the assignment. But in the absence of national reports, it is very difficult to assess implementation. So the average implementation across the conventions varies, but not that much. Again, the absence of reports from all countries somewhat prevents an objective measure of implementation, and we hope that this exercise will now help more countries to submit the national reports so that we could have a more comprehensive view and data set on the level of implementation and the kind of obstacles that countries perhaps are facing. So in terms of implementation, this is for all countries across the world. The Basel Convention is somewhat higher than the other conventions at 3.59. However, this varies across the world. As you see on the heat map that we have created, in the deeper green are the countries that perform better, that implement to a greater degree, and countries around the world are able to fulfill their obligations under the Basel Convention. Many countries in this region are performing fairly well, as you can see, but in the deep gray are the countries where we have no national reports and therefore are not able to assess the level of implementation. The Stockholm Convention is a rather different story. It is a highly technical convention on persistent organic pollutants. Developing countries do have significant challenges even reporting on this convention, and here we see that the performance of developed countries is as expectedly better. However, that is a very different story for the Ramsar Convention on wetlands. We see a much deeper green color across Asia, for example, where countries are fulfilling their obligations to protect wetlands. Why that is the case, we don't know, and it would require serious work with countries in terms of case studies and deep research to figure out what enables countries to fulfill these international obligations, and what are their best practices, what are some of the challenges. CITES, of course, presents a significant challenge in terms of assessing implementation because of the lack of reporting. As you can see in this region of the world, pretty much most countries are colored in the deep gray, and across Africa there is a very serious challenge of reporting to the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. If we look now into the data for the League of Arab States, we can compare how countries perform. We start again with the reporting rate. It is lower than the parties on average across all of the conventions, but again, for the Ramsar Convention, it is considerably higher than for the other conventions at 70% of reporting, for example. In terms of the top 5 performers or the top 5 reporters, so to say, Qatar, Iraq, Morocco, Bahrain, and Tunisia have reported from 88% of the time to 68% of the time. The bottom 5 reporters have trouble report that the countries that have trouble reporting include Lebanon, which has reported only 22% of the time that it was supposed to report. And Saudi Arabia has never reported to any of these conventions, unfortunately. In terms of implementation, if we look into the Basel Convention, the results are actually quite inspiring. Morocco and Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia performing fairly well, with Morocco having a score of 4.73. It is indeed performing way better than many other countries in the world, well above the world average of 3.59. Why is that the case? What is Morocco doing right? Morocco, Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia, what is happening in those countries that is enabling them to fulfill these obligations? What can other countries in this region learn from their neighbors who are able to implement their conventions? To me, this is a very uplifting story, a very inspiring one, and I hope that these conversations would enable broader conversations about collaboration and learning from each other. In the Stockholm Convention, again, we have Morocco and Egypt at performing fairly well above the world average. And in the Ramsar Convention, Algeria and Egypt also well above the world average. Many countries across the region are performing quite well on these conventions. For CITES, the United Arab Emirates is performing quite well at 3.8. It is obvious from many of the world news that the UAE is working quite intensively with the Convention Secretariat of CITES. So, in summary, this is a very quick overview of a large issue, but countries are trying. Many are actually leading the way. Some are among the leaders in the world that are in this region, and there are significant opportunities for countries in the Arab League to actually learn from each other, have a conversation on best practices, on challenges, create strategies for overcoming them and moving forward together. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to engaging with you.